I had to walk away from Judy Dench once in Mother Courage and just face up stage because I was weeping with laughter. Don't try and be interesting. Be interested. Be interested in the other person. And that's what will make you interesting to them. You are the best you there is. There is no other you. And what you are is what will take you on your journey. So don't worry about things, because there's a space for you.
My guest for this episode is Paul Clayton, a professional actor for over 40 years. Paul has appeared in some of the most well-known British shows of all time, from Doctor Who to Coronation Street, Drop the Dead Donkey and The Crown. He's probably most recognisable for playing Ian Chapman, Sophie's dad, in the hit comedy Peep Show. And more recently, he's been gracing our screens as Dennis in the new Disney Plus series of The Full Monty. A published fiction and non-fiction author and an accomplished theatre director, Paul has also worked with some of the biggest brands on the planet, staging their corporate events. I first met Paul over 20 years ago during one of my early forays into the corporate training world. Now, he's a master storyteller and an absolute expert when it comes to helping people perform under pressure, so I had to get him on the show to share his wisdom. If you enjoy what you hear, please leave a review, like, comment and subscribe. It would mean the world to me and will help this podcast reach as many people as possible. You don't want to miss this. Enjoy. Paul, welcome to the show. My first question for you. In life, what's the most important thing that you've ever had to pitch for?
Oh, goodness. I love the way you're going to start with the most difficult one first. I suppose I think the most important pitch is one that we do unconsciously a lot of the time. And it's making rapport with people we like instantly. There's always somebody in a social group, isn't there, who's the sort of leader, the natural person. If they're very good looking, they've probably never had to be funny in their life. Everybody's always gravitated. And we want to be friends with them. It was the boy at school or the girl we all wanted to be friends with. And of course, the way not to do that was to fall over ourselves trying to do things for them and be with them, but was to remain that word that's going to come up probably, authentic, to remain ourselves and hope they liked what they saw. And I think that's the most difficult thing, that sometimes you see people, either it's somebody who you're attracted to sexually, or it's somebody you just think they'd be really great to hang about with, and you make a little bit too much effort. And you're not interesting. And it comes down to that rule of don't try and be interesting. Be interested, be interested in the other person. And that's what will make you interesting to them.
That makes so much sense if you think about, our experiences as actors when we're going into audition for roles. Sometimes when that kind of desperation and desire to impress kicks in, I've been on the other side of the table as a director in those moments, and it's actually a real kind of turn off. You're like, okay, well, I know that you're good, but now I feel like I'm paying less attention or giving you the wrong attention because of the way that you're approaching me.
I think there's a thing, isn't there, that we do when we're young actors, and we are actors, but perhaps we don't know who we are as people. And we go into the room and, hey, I'm trained, I'm an actor, I got a first. What do you want me to be? And they don't know what they want me to be because they want to see what I am. And I think you get to that stage, and I think it took me probably until I was round about 40 to walk in the room and go, hi, this is me, would you like it? And as that happens, people do start liking it, because I know when I sat there as a director and interviewed an awful lot of people, you do see a lot of desperation. You see people come in who are desperate to please, desperate to get the work, and that's understandable. But when they've gone out of the room, you don't know anything about them. You don't know what they're like. And they're going to be the person that's in the rehearsal room for 3 weeks with you. They are going to be part of your creative pack. And, the thing about a director is get the right people and they do the work for you. When actors in rehearsal go, can I do this? And they do something and it's brilliantly funny. I always go, yeah, because it's still my name on the poster. But, I want people to do that. So I need to see that spark and that ability in that interview. And I think it's difficult when we're desperate to please rather than we've gathered a little bit of awareness of, this is me. Hello, I'm 6'2", I'm Yorkshire, or I'm Northern posh. I can do posh and Northern, and sometimes I push the envelope and do posh Northern. I'm gay, or am I? I don't care. It's what they see. This is what I am. It's what I bring into the room, and if they like it, and I think it actually makes rejection a little bit easier because you can say, it's not that they're saying you're not good. It's just that you're not right, and I can deal with not being right. But I think I'd have more of a problem if I thought I wasn't good.
I love that. And what's fascinating about what you just said is, of course, that it transfers directly into any industry. That's not just about being an actor, that's about being a human being. And it's not just a director, it's a leader. It's anyone who's trying to create that kind of high performing team. And we need to really value ourselves rather than worry about what other people's opinion of our worth is. If those sort of moments of understanding are the most important pitches that we have you got any examples in your career where you've got it wrong, where the thing that you wanted got away?
Well, I think very early on I was up for something in the West End, and it got to the point whereby I went back and I went to read, and it was reading with two knights, Sir Anthony Quayle and Sir Peter Barkworth, and then I was given the script, and I was sent, because you weren't allowed to take them away, and we didn't have email or anything, and I was sent to a little room in the Theatre Royal Haymarket where I was given a pot of tea and nice china, and told to read the script and then to leave it at the stage door and to let my agent know whether I was interested in doing it. And of course, I was falling over myself. I was 25. And as I was reading it, Sir Ronald Miller, Thatcher's speechwriter, who'd written this play, popped his head round the door and went, "Hello, I'm Ronnie." And I went, "Hello." And he went, "Lovely to see you, lovely to see you. And I just wanted to check how old you are." I was desperate to please. I just straight away, "Oh, I'm 25, And I had read about 5 minutes earlier that this was a 28-year-old guardsman. And I thought, later, I just thought, they think by looking at me, I am suitable to play this. But having now been told that I am 25 and the other guy is 28, they're just going to go with the facts. And it's not about lying, it's about listening. And I think that's the key thing, because it's like when you're cast in something, and a lot of people spend their time, young actors, and I think people in large businesses, thinking, what's my role? What's my strength? What's my... And actually, you're not in charge of that. We don't cast ourselves. Other people look at us and work out what we are and say, we want you to be this. And they give us the power to then do things. And if they cast us brilliantly, we look fabulous. And if they take a risk on us, then we may look good or we may look less than good. And in business, I think it's your peers that look at you and think you'd be really great in comms, or let's move you into impact, or why don't we try you in sales, because they see what your abilities are. So that's why it comes back to this thing of relaxing, being ourselves, and letting other people take care of making those decisions.
I think that's so astute, that idea that we don't cast ourselves. I'd never really thought about it in that way before, but it's blindingly obvious that ultimately someone else makes that decision for us. You're a hugely successful actor, you're a novelist, a theatre director, and you've worked in the corporate world helping the likes of McDonald's stage massive internal conferences. But what's your story? Like, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Boringly, I did want to be an actor. I was 7, and I rehearsed a play for 3 playtimes with Christine Evans and Susan Clark in the playground. And we persuaded Miss Woodcock that we could show this play to the rest of the class. So this was the last year of infant school. I don't know what year that corresponds with now under the year system.
Year 6 now. Yeah, year
Year
6.
6. Thank you. That's very good. And she pushed the chairs back, and we did this play in which there was a witch and a princess with a baby, and I really, really pushed the casting envelope by playing a daring do, soldier who was back from the wars. I don't know where all that came from. We probably must have read a book. In my mind, that play lasted 15 minutes. I think it probably lasted about 3 minutes. But I know that at the end of it, standing in the middle of the circle and having made people laugh and people clapping, I thought, I want more of this. And it started doing things that were for other people and got responses from other people were fulfilling things to do. And I did go to a big red brick grammar school, very grand in South Yorkshire, who told me that I could do that better by doing law or journalism. And I sort of thought about both. And it's funny now that it's come full circle. And for the last 10 years, I've had a column in the Stage. And so I get to do the journalism. But I think my only experience of law has been probably defending myself from speeding fines and things, really. So I stuck with it, and I resisted the temptation to go to Oxbridge. My school weren't particularly bothered about telling me that Oxbridge was a very fertile ground for theatrics. And so I went off, and my parents in South Yorkshire had their own business. So I had a very lovely childhood. But then when it got to the stage of being awarded grants, in the days when we got those, I realised my parents actually weren't as rich as I thought they were. And I got a full grant, but they couldn't afford to send me to London. So I went to Manchester. And actually, it was rather brilliant because going to Manchester, my first job was in Manchester at the Royal Exchange. I did telly at Granada TV, as it was. And it was a couple of years before I came to wicked old, London. But I think it was really good to stay in touch with my roots for a while. But in those days, unlike now, Manchester is a massive centre now. Disney used it an awful lot. We did the full Monty based in Manchester 2 years ago. And I know Cobra, that brilliant series on Sky with Robert Carlyle, is based in Manchester. But in those days, Manchester, you couldn't really sustain a career, and you had to do that thing of moving to London, which I did. And in those days, it was physically possible, and it was cheap enough, and it was fun. And I think that's all changed. But it was an early ambition. I think, Celia Imrie once said to me that you have to want to act or die. She said it can't be that you might think about acting. You just got to know that it consumes you. And it did. It did. I wasn't going to settle for anything less. And I have been very lucky. It hasn't all been easy, but I have been very lucky.
Did you have to go down the route of, getting your equity card and doing the acting ASM thing, or did you manage to get cast in something straight away?
I did get a card. I got a card because the London Festival Ballet came to Manchester and advertised for supernumeraries, and they came to our drama school, and those of us who were interested had to walk around the room while a rather imperious woman from the London Festival Ballet stood in the middle looking at us. I was one of about 5 that she picked. And then when we got to Manchester Opera House on the Sunday to rehearse it, Sleeping Beauty, I was picked to be the Prince's Guard. And that meant that wherever the Prince appeared, I appeared behind holding a spear. Very good practice for Shakespeare later at the Royal Shakespeare Company. See, look, I can do both hands. And I did that for a week. The rather amazing thing was that on the Wednesday night, the Prince was Rudolf Nureyev, and he did the matinee as well. And at the matinee, I kept running off between appearances to my dressing room on the 7th floor of the Manchester Opera House to put on another coloured uniform and run back down. And when I came back for the evening, all my costumes had disappeared. And I had to go, my things aren't here. And they said, Mr. Nureyev's had them moved to his sitting room. And he'd had all my costumes moved to the sitting room of his dressing room. And very imperiously, he sort of said to me, you should not have to go every rushing upstairs when we are changing. You change here, yeah? And you sort of don't say yes, really. You don't say no. It was a very strange thing, because after all these people came in his dressing room and had a drink with him, they all went home and he was alone. And he took me out for supper, and then I went back to my bedsit, and it was a rather strange encounter with sort of, this colossal figure in the world of ballet. And at the end of it, I thought that must be worth an equity card. And I wrote to Equity, and I didn't hear anything for 3 months. And so I wrote to them again. I said, what's happened to my application? They said, oh, what was it? And I said, well, I was in the Sleeping Beauty. And they went, okay. And 2 days later, literally, I remember it was the day before Good Friday, an equity card was in an envelope. I was at home on an Easter break, and there was my red provincial equity card. And then another actor who'd done it went, oh, great, brilliant, I'm getting it. And he wrote to Equity, and they wrote back within 4 days and said, that job doesn't qualify you for Equity membership. So I've probably been an illegal, really, for years. I shouldn't be doing it. But then I have mixed feelings about Equity. I mean, I think one of the best things that Equity cards could be is driving licenses for actors, and you have points. And, when you do something really bad, and come on, we know, we've all been capable of doing that.
We've been
then
there.
You get endorsements, and if you get 12 points, you're off the screen for a year.
You're struck off.
And, no names, no pack drill, but there are some people I would be very, very grateful if they didn't pop onto my screen for 12 months. And I'm sure there are lots of people who would like not to see me for a year. So it goes both ways.
I love that. Sorry to interrupt, but before we continue with the episode, I've got a favour to ask. I'm on a mission to get this podcast in the hands of as many people as possible. So if you found what you've heard so far valuable, please, please, please like, comment, rate and subscribe. These things make a huge difference to our reach. And if you're open to it, if you happen to know just one person, someone who, just like you, would benefit from listening to these conversations, then please share the podcast with them. Let's get on with it. So talk me through that kind of early experience of leaving Manchester, coming down to London, and kind of trying to find your way, because you ended up at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and you worked extensively in theatre and television. But how did you make that kind of early name for yourself? How did you pitch yourself so that you started to become known to casting directors and directors?
I don't know whether I did. I mean, in those days, you could start without an agent, which is what I did. So I went to the Royal Exchange, and then because I was there, I got 2 bit parts at Granada, and then you wrote letters for jobs, and we had lots of wonderful theatres. My next stage was York Theatre Royal, and I spent 9 months sharing a dressing room with a young actor. We were in everything. We played the servants in Romeo and Juliet, and the servants in She Stoops to Conquer, and his name was, I don't know what happened to him. His name was Gary Oldman. He was gone nowhere. Absolutely done nothing, gone nowhere. Of course, just happens to be one of the greatest screen actors in the world. But he played the cat in the panto while I was the front of the cow. And you just did that. And then eventually I did get an agent who started changing the things I was up for. And the minute I got an agent and I started going up for big things, like the West End, I then spent 9 months out of work, which was the first time I'd ever been out of work. And I I suppose it was just on my very first day as an actor, a wonderful actress at the Royal Exchange. She'd worked with Olivier and everything. And of course, you come out of drama school and you have to have self-belief. And we read The Winter's Tale in a church hall in North London, which was going to tour Europe. And we were all getting our coffee on the break. And she came up to me and laid a beautifully manicured hand on my shoulder and went, "Hello, may I say something?" And I said, yeah, please. And she went, "I thought you read that beautifully." And I went, "Well, yeah, of course I did." "Oh, thank you very much," but having that little self-belief and arrogance. And then she just went, "May I say something else?" And I said, "Please do." And then she said, "When you're 40, you'll never stop." And I thought, is she consigning me to 19 years of unemployment because I was 21? And she wasn't, because I did work a lot in my 20s and my 30s. But things didn't take off really until, when I was at drama school, I'd always played really nice parts, which were strong, white, middle-aged men, because that's what a lot of our drama canon's based on. So Brack in Hedda Gabler, Undershaft in Major Barbara. And they've been great, because I was never Romeo. I mean, I wasn't even Benvolio. I was Gregory, omnipurpose servant. I was never young dad for television commercials. I was once Yorkshire cheeky window cleaner, I think, for a coffee app. I think that's about as busy as it got. But actually, as I got to 40, suddenly vicars, politicians, bank managers, and then by the time it took to getting to 50, to join Peep Show on Channel 4. And then the last 18 years have been brilliant, because they've been a continual rise. And I think the thing is that I appreciate it, and I've dealt with it better than I ever would have done as a young person, because I'd have been really shit dealing with fame and recognition and things. And now it's really nice, and one's able to use it for good things. And it's a benefit rather than a hindrance. But I'm glad it took time. And what it also did in that time, it did give me time to explore other things that my skill set could do, but that I'd never thought of. So I had directed a one-act play at drama school, but I didn't think I would ever be a director. And I stopped acting for 6 years in my 30s and did nothing else. And alongside that, because the projects took time to set up, I got involved in the strange world of corporate training and, simulated patients and things. And then I was able to start melding the two things together. So the directing and the training started to make a fit. And that has been really lucky, because the thing about actors now is that for none of us, even for some of the people we look at on the television and think, "Oh God, they're being paid thousands," nobody's financial circle is entirely supported by acting. It may be because they've cleverly invested in property with money from films and things. It may be because they have what were referred to as side hustles, but I think now are really vital other sources of, I'm not only going to say money, but I'm going to say satisfaction.
Yeah, I think that's really key. It's not just about earning the cash. It's about having something that you can be proud of, that you can focus on, that you can be creative in, that isn't necessarily an identity statement. Because I think acting is one of those weird jobs where, like, I am an actor. There's much more association with that than, I drive a truck, or I work for a bank. People don't make that identity leap in the same way for most other careers. You mentioned Sophie's dad, or you mentioned Peep Show. You're probably most recognisable as that character of Ian Chapman from that show. I mean, we've been out for dinner and people kind of recognise you and go, "Oh, is that? can you do the accent?" How did that come about? Was that just another audition, or did you know the team that were working on it?
No. It was absolutely cold, and I'd never seen Peep Show, so I was reading it all as scenes, and then my husband at the time had watched an episode or something. He said, "You need to look it up on YouTube because they do it all to camera." And I went, "What?" And then I watched a quick clip on the Sunday afternoon. I went, "Oh, God." So I went in, and then I did that thing of, I'm quite good at talking myself out of things. So I sat there, and you do get to the stage, because I was about to be 50, where when you go for interviews, the same actors are put up against you. So there were some very good actors who I really admire, and one came out before me, and I thought, he's perfect. If I were casting this, he'd be it. What brilliant casting! Yeah. And I went in, and Robert Popper, who was the producer, who is delightful, explained it to me, and he had a little video camera, and he said, "So you'll do it to cameras, do it." And I thought, okay. I thought, I've just got to have fun, really. So I remember it was the scene from my very first episode where I'm in the pub talking to David Mitchell, talking to Mark about love, and are you the woman, are you the man who's going to marry my Sophie? And I thought, it's about differentiating. So you have to make a decision on what you're going to do when you read sides. It's no good thinking they're going to tell me how to play it. You have to go in and offer something. It's a pitch, isn't it? This is our offering, and then they're going to choose whether they accept it. So I thought, okay, go. So I just leant forward and I grabbed hold of the sides of the camera, the shutter, and brought it with me. I'm going, "So, Mark, you're the man who's going to marry my Sophie, are you? Well, what's going to happen when the physical thing goes, because..." And they loved it, and I didn't know anything good until I was on set, and then Robert said, "Oh God, we loved what you did." And I asked him, "What did I do?" "Oh no, tell me what I did." And they said, "You just absolutely had no problem with that thing about it. So you're talking to David, but then you step away and you're talking into the lens to somebody behind it." And I didn't really. I mean, I think the thing was that I was actually quite bad at television when I started off, because we were theatre trained. So anything you were doing, you would throw out. And I would sort of throw it out to the camera, and occasionally do those really dreadful camera flicks where your eye hits the lens, and then they have to go again and go, "Oh, I think you might have caught the lens." I was shamelessly playing to camera. So, hello, this was the right package. And I think he was due to do 2 episodes, and I stayed for 10 years. And it's amazing. Lockdown has given us a whole new generation. We had 9 series, and people watched all 9 back to back. I did the full Monty with Robert Carlyle a couple of years ago, the new television series, and we were sat together, and he's delightful, and he'd watched it with his teenage sons during lockdown. Of course, they'd done it back to back. We were in a backstreet restaurant in Porto a couple of weeks ago with my partner. And after the meal, the waiters came out with a picture of Sophie's dad on their phones and going, "Is this you?" I didn't even know it was shown in Portugal. It's got a different... So it's brilliant. It's how lovely that people want to come and I think they wrote him originally as that he might be a bit of a victim, but he was the first adult character who they gave any real story to. And I felt he was very hard done by and a bit tragic. And the people love him. I was in Manchester the other week doing a Peep Show quiz for Young Lives Against Cancer. and we must have had about 600 people there, all of whom were probably too young to have ever seen it when it originally went out. And yeah, they just think they love him. They love him. So I'm very grateful to it.
I mean, that set feels like it might have been quite a naughty set to work on. Like there's some brilliant people involved, and everyone's got such a kind of great sense of humour. And like, how do you keep a straight face in that environment and actually do the work and deliver the lines?
Yeah, well, you know me well enough to know that the last thing I do is keep a straight face. I mean, I've had to just walk away from. I had to walk away from Judy Dench once in Mother Courage and just face up stage because I was weeping with laughter because she also is one of life's great gigglers, and we just decided that the best thing was that I'm 6'2", and if I looked straight ahead, she wasn't in my field of vision because she's about 5'4". And we played a whole scene together most nights with her looking at my chest and me looking at the exit sign. And some nights, fatally, our eyes clashed and we would just go. We did on Peep Show. We had a lot of fun. And there was an enormous amount of wit about it. David, of course, as we all now know from panel shows, is just absolutely so quick-witted. Robert's so dry. And the writers, Sam and Jesse, and of course Jesse went on to create Succession, for which we've all been glued to in recent years. And it was very friendly. I think the thing was that there was a welcome atmosphere, that even going in on my first day, we did the scene walking and giving Nana's cottage to Mark and Sophie, and you have to do everything loads of times because the camera has to become each one of you, so the shooting process is much slower. But it was a very cold morning, but there was a lot of laughter and a lot of shared humour. We all met up recently because it's 20 years last year that the first series came out, and we had a night at the BFI. We did a Q&A and we showed the two top episodes. We showed one episode that was Robert and David's favourite, and then we showed the episode which has been consistently voted by Peep Show fans to be the best episode, which is Sophie's wedding. And I've never seen it with an audience because I would watch it when it was transmitted or have taped it and watched it later. So I'm not a great laugher out loud anyway, but to watch it, sit with my partner in an audience of 800 people who roared with laughter at it, and you think, oh God, I sort of get it now. But I mean, people, they know the script, they know the lines. If I go and do a Peep Show quiz evening, they know the dialogue inside out, and it's amazing.
It must be incredibly gratifying to be able to kind of create that catharsis for people, essentially, because it's a form of escape. It's something that we can all relate to, and I think that's why it's funny, because it's uncomfortable and amusing at the same time. It's an amazing thing to have been a part of, and then to have been part of a team that have gone on to do such amazing things. Coleman going through the stratosphere in the last couple of years. It must be amazing to see that journey.
And the brilliant thing is that all of them, they're very, the thing we have, having been part of a team, is that actors, we go in and out of teams several times a year.
All the time, yeah.
And we make those bonds very quickly, and then we sort of walk away from them. I think now, my heart used to be broken at the end of every job when I was in my 20s. And, oh my goodness, we've got to go meet up next Tuesday. And now you say goodbye, being really nice, and you go away. But you know that the minute you see that person or you contact them, you pick up exactly where you were. And in lockdown, my children's charity in Rotherham were planning a poetry evening with the kids' poetry going to be read by some actors we didn't know who. And then, of course, lockdown came, but the kids were still writing their poetry. So we got together about going online, and I emailed people, just got my address book out. So Gary Oldman in Palm Springs, but Olivia and David, and sent them all poems and said, would you just do this on your iPhone, and send it, and we're going to make a gala which will premiere on YouTube. And they were absolutely on it and up for it. And of course, and there were soap stars and people, but it was magic. And you are a 9-year-old and you've written a poem about the joy of reading at night under the covers, and Olivia Colman reads it sitting there by candlelight that she's done at home. It's the most magic gift you could give to somebody. They are so generous with their time and their talents.
That's absolutely amazing. We first worked together in a corporate setting way back when I was still in drama school. So I think we were role playing for a teachers' conference. I was like that nightmare pupil that was kind of swearing at the staff, and I think you were giving your kind of difficult parent or your authoritarian.
You were wearing something resembling uniform, weren't you, Dominic Colenso?
It was my school uniform. I dug out my school uniform with the tie and everything. I remember it very vividly.
Well,
hello. How did you get into the world of corporate training and acting? Because I mean, you've written a book on it. So you've written a book called "So You Want to Be a Corporate Actor." How did you start?
I applied to a company called Roll Call, which was run by an actress called Debbie Manship, and they were one of the first. They started in the mid-'80s. Debbie had been in a really successful medical drama called Angels, and when she came out, the work didn't just continue. So together with somebody she worked with, Sharon Rose, they formed a role play company, mainly dealing at that stage in medical stuff. And I went to have a chat with her. I think somebody recommended me. And I started doing cancer work, which I've done a lot of. I did a big study called Talking Cancer with the wonderful Professor Fallowfield. But I remember the first thing was having to do the difficult conversations that doctors have with patients when they're giving diagnoses. And I was thinking, I don't know how on any way am I qualified to do this? And of course, that remarkable barrier happens that you're sat in a room with 4 or 5 oncologists and you've been given a brief as to, you're getting the results for your bowel cancer test, and you're given the problem, which is that this particular male doctor can't really cope with men who express emotion. And you're thinking, you don't plan it, hopefully, but for them it's real. And we are focused in on them and are reacting. We're not creating, we are reacting to everything they say. And that builds, and it can build emotion, and the room disappears. I mean, for me, it was going back to something I said earlier, it was the moment when I learned how to do television. Because when I was working with somebody in a role play situation, it was for them, and the rest of the room didn't exist. So that thing I'd always had about, I must let this be seen and show it, went. And I thought, do you know, I think this is what you should be doing when the television camera's on you. And at the time I started role play, 1992, 93, was the time I started to get more and more television. And it certainly made an effort. And then I was really keen with my director head on in the conversations that were had about how the conversation had worked and why people had felt like that. And through the cancer program, 4 or 5 of us, very luckily, were trained at the University of Sussex with the psychosocial oncological unit. Try saying that after a non-alcoholic Heineken. The psychosocial oncological unit trained us as facilitators, and it was the greatest gift because I come from Rotherham. I can't spell the word tact, let alone use it. But having facilitation skills means I have a rule book in order to manage that feedback and that relationship in what is a very sensitive and raw situation for people. And I love it. And I love that moment when somebody realizes how effective something they've said or done is. And I've had the privilege to have, I hope I never have to go and have that meeting for myself, but if I do, I know there are some doctors out there who are just wonderful, and it's not because of their medical knowledge, it's entirely because of the conversations they have. And that's so true in so many areas of business. It's not what you're selling and what you're talking about. It's how you do it. The ability to talk, I think, still makes somebody king.
Absolutely. I mean, you know how passionate I am about the toolkit that we have and how it can, you know, work in a corporate context. From your perspective, what are some of the tools that, you know, actors, creatives, writers, directors use that are most applicable in the kind of real world, as it were?
I think the knowledge of you are the best you there is, and you are original, and you don't have to do what other people are doing. You know, if you and I were going to play the same role, it would be entirely different. We'd have the same words, we could wear the same costume, but it would be an entirely different person. And I wouldn't try and be you, and you, probably with great good sense, wouldn't try and be me. But I think the fact is that in business, people do look up the ladder, or as I call it, the hierarchy of fear, to their superiors, and they try and emulate what they see rather than when they get there being what they are. So I try and always work. I have some precepts and some techniques that I think these do work and are effective, but I think they're only effective once you've met that person and started talking to that person about their needs. You know, you do get it occasionally, don't you? That when you're in a situation, and it's brilliant if you can have a one-to-one, but sometimes you might have two or three, or you might be in a conference situation, you're dealing with somebody, and there's a senior manager or an exec or somebody by there, and they've got expertise and knowledge, and they start, you know, dropping it in. And they're talking codswallop. They're talking absolute codswallop. And so you have to sort of deal with the fact and say to them, well, I think that's interesting that you feel that Dominic should do a squat jump at the end of every paragraph to get his energy up. Let's see how that works for Dominic, shall we? And you do want to say, why didn't you shut the fuck up? Because you paid for me to come and explore with this person. But you know, so my facilitation skills have come in very useful there. But I think it's the fact that you have make to fail. We are not perfect as actors, but we're not frightened of cocking up. And I think that's the great step out there. Look, we're fallible, and fallible is human. So all these people go, I tripped over a word, or I can't remember my. Well, have a crib sheet. You know, if you make a word, just go, sorry, and carry on. And giving people that right to be themselves in that space, that spotlight, whether it's a real spotlight shining on us at a conference, or whether it's the spotlight created by the glare of 12 execs at a boardroom table, or a client across the table that you're pitching, that spotlight makes people change their behavior. And things that they do naturally and effectively in their own lives without thinking about it, they go right out of the window. So I try and look at what those things are and give them techniques that they can put them back. It's like, you know, when you and I do a stage play, we walk around a lot. You know, you deal with your kids. I walk to, you know, sometimes in the rehearsal room, you walk onto the stage, you can't work out where right and left go. And you're thinking, I seem to have lost the ability to walk. And it's because you're aware that, you know, you're in that watched arena. And of course, we grow used to it. But I think for some people, they feel that pressure and their natural skills go inside, and you want to say, this is how, this is what you do naturally, and point it out to them. And now this is how you add it back in when it might be missing.
Yeah.
That's a bit
I think one of
waffly,
the
isn't it,
things,
from me?
but I think what you hit on there is the idea of, being open to failure and being also open to deliberate practice, which is something that actors do. And often when I'm working with people in a more kind of business setting, if you say just take 5 minutes and rehearse, someone in an office environment invariably will sit there and think about it, or they'll open up their laptop, or they might, if they've written a script, they might walk around and look at the words. Whereas if you say to an actor, go and rehearse, then they walk around and they make noise and they use their bodies, and they build that kind of muscle memory. I was speaking at a conference last weekend, and I got some quite strange looks from some of the kind of lagging members of the audience that hadn't gone out for the coffee break, when during my sound check I got up onto stage and walked right down stage left and down stage right, and then walked around the auditorium and worked out what was going on. And I don't think that people in that kind of corporate setting necessarily have the freedom to do those things. So I think that kind of experience of failure and it being all right to fail in the rehearsal room is something that's really important to take into the business setting.
Yeah, and I think it's just really good. I worked with somebody for 2 days this week, and he's a real communicator and very good, and I thought he was great. But the thing is that sometimes they expect it to happen without any work, that you're going to have a session with them, and because you're a wizard at what you do, Dominic, it'll be all right for them. And you want to go, actually, when we appear on television or when we appear on a stage, this isn't the first fucking time we've done it. 6 weeks rehearsal, and now I look like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But they go away, and then they come back and they go, and you want to say, like, did you look at this? Oh, I was really busy. And you say, well, if it doesn't matter to you so much to stand in front of 600 people that you aren't prepared to spend an hour rehearsing it, then ultimately the effect of what you create in front of those 600 people will be less. That's my bugbear, is that they get to the stage that they think we have a wand and you get a reputation, and that you go in and you go, oh, hello, well, in many respects, people may think I'm a fairy, but speech fairy, I am not. So it's in them. And I think the thing is our ability to just ask some questions that unlocks it within their own skill set.
One other sort of transferable skill that comes from our world or the creative world, and that can be taken into the business world, is storytelling. And as you've proved over the last 45 minutes or so, you're a natural storyteller, and you're a novelist as well. So how for people listening, how can people develop that storytelling technique if they feel that it's not within their wheelhouse?
I think it's the fact that we do all have stories. But it's about, again, it goes back to that thing at the beginning. It's not about you. It's what effect do you want the story to have? How do you want people to feel? It's like presentations are not, they're not the best method of disseminating information. Despite that, thousands of them are done every year where people give nothing but information. But the people who think about, how do I want people to feel when I finished speaking? Because if you go back to the stories that are sort of have co-ownership between all of us, like Cinderella, and we want, and they all lived happily ever after, or we want that feeling at the end, or we want the sadness, of the little pigs and the housing problem. But it's sort of rather feral storytelling in the sense that we're curious. And when somebody starts to tell us something that's leading somewhere, we start to listen and we learn more about them. And I think the thing is that these days, you have to find an opportunity to tell your story. You have to find the bits of your life, think back, because that's what will be unique. So I think it is a difficult thing, but funnily enough, we're going out doing some storytelling workshops for a project we're doing for a big client later this year. And just that thing of getting people to, we get people to give a headline. Think of something that's happened to you that you like in your story. And then we say, what would the headline be for that story if it were in the Daily Mail? What would the headline be if it were in the Telegraph? And they get that. And then we say, so now tell me the first paragraph, or be a newsreader and announce that story on the news. And they suddenly start going into, they'll give information and whatever, and then, but you get them to go a few sentences further, and they start talking about the feelings of it. That it was, they'll use adjectives, which are key, which seem to disappear from corporate speak, but help, happy, like, love. And suddenly they've got a story. And when you get stories, the wonderful thing is when people are surprised by their own story. And I know we collected a load for a conference we did in 2018, and people delivered them live on stage in their own words. And because it was their own words that they told to somebody in a private room, but then when they did it in front of an audience of 2,500 people, they didn't have any problem with it. And it was absolutely magical.
I think it is. It's that ability to connect with emotion in a way that we would do in an intimate setting. You said it was a story that they told to someone sitting in a room. We have this kind of disconnect when we suddenly have to tell it to an audience. But if we were sitting in the pub with a mate or sitting around the dinner table with our friends, we naturally fall into that anyway. And it's all about the audience, and it's all about the emotion in those moments too. Paul, I could sit here and talk about this stuff all day, and it's been really fascinating to pick your brains. But I wonder if I can ask you one final question. If you could go back and give that young man in Mrs. Woodcock, I think her name was, in Mrs. Woodcock's class, one piece, what piece of advice would it be?
I think I'd just take him to one side and say, you are the best you there is. There is no other you. And what you are is what will take you on your journey. So don't worry about things, because there's a space for you.
That's beautiful. Paul, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Dominic, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking me to join you.
Thanks for listening to the Why Life's a Pitch podcast. If you'd like to improve the way you pitch and communicate, I'm giving away a special gift to all my listeners. We've developed the Pitching with Impact scorecard to help you benchmark your pitch performance in 6 key areas. It'll take you less than 5 minutes to complete, and you'll receive a detailed, personalised report packed full of insights and ideas to help you improve and grow. Just head over to dominiccolenso.com/scorecard to get started.